You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or you might be streaming us on the web, WMClive.com, where you can also find links to podcasts of all our previous shows. And I want to hear from you, so tweet me at hashtag WMCLive or email me at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Now, on today's show, we talk with a former roller derby skater turned blogging comedienne. Yeah. We look at the painful reality endured by restaurant workers and also what they're doing about it. And we have a conversation about a much-needed new campaign called the Conversation Project. Last, a human rights attorney and I wrestle with our surprising ambivalence about privacy encroachment versus security concerns. But first, we have to look inside the headlines. The Alliance for Justice has come out with some interesting inside the headlines information. The Supreme Court's decisions this term, as we've feared, could have disastrous consequences for a number of people. The ability of consumers, victims of discrimination, human rights plaintiffs, and so forth, to get even close to a fair day in court. Specifically, in this term, the court could provide a shield for corporations and other actors committing human rights abuses abroad. That's the Kielbel case. Continue to give big businesses a free pass to force consumers into mandatory arbitration, providing a massive loophole for accountability. That's the Italian Colors case. Eviscerate efforts to ensure diversity on college campuses. That's Fisher. Close the courtroom doors to class actions seeking redress for corporate malfeasance. The decisions could also immunize employers who create a hostile work environment for women and racial minorities. I hate the phrase racial minorities because actually people of color are the majority of the human species, but never mind. It could also allow federal court judges to punish debtors who go to court to challenge debt collectors' abusive practices. All this is so not good news, so this is to be on the alert for the court decisions. But there's also some good news, and giving credit where credit is due. I've been a little cranky at Obama for reasons that I'm sure you would understand lately, but this is important. Again, the Alliance for Justice has released news that we're not getting from the media. Obama has named a greater percentage of women to federal judgeships than any other president in American history. In fact, nobody else even comes close. He is the first president to appoint 2 women to the Supreme Court, which means now that 3 sit on the court for the first time in history. 42% of his appointees have been women. That's a rate almost double that of George Bush, at 22%, and almost 50% greater than that of President Clinton. Obama has already appointed more female federal judges than Bush did in his entire presidency, 80 to 71. Obama already has appointed more women judges who are women of color than President George Bush or President Clinton. He's appointed 33. President Obama has quintupled the number of Asian Pacific American women Article III judges in all of American history. Would that there were more of them all in the off-key singing group called the Supremes. Well, our first guest. What if, when we ate out, whether at a gourmet restaurant or a diner, what if we really took notice of the person, usually female, serving us? Restaurant owners and our own ignorance and indifference conspire to make waitresses, waiters, and busboys as good as invisible. Saru Jarayaman, or Saru for short, created an organization to make them visible. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Saru.
Hi, thanks for having me.
This group that you co-founded and which you co-direct is really remarkable, and its progress is remarkable.
Thank you.
The Restaurant Opportunities Centers, ROC. was started after September 11th, after the tragedy of the attacks, and you started it. Tell me if I'm wrong. Because of all the displaced restaurant workers in the buildings that fell and in the regions, and then now, a few years later, historically speaking, you've got affiliates in New Orleans, Miami, Michigan, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Houston, and Washington, D.C., and all these workplace justice campaigns. This is extraordinary work that you've done. Tell us how you got from there to here.
The restaurant industry right now is the largest and fastest growing sector of the U.S. economy, but it also happens to be the absolute lowest paying with the worst benefits, literally. The Department of Labor says that 7 of the 11 lowest paying jobs in America and the 2 absolute lowest paying jobs, lower than every other type of job, are restaurant jobs. And so when we started the organization after 9/11, initially we were helping just help get workers back on their feet. Mm-hmm. But we were so quickly overwhelmed with workers' cries for help, first from all over New York City and then all over the country, because when you have the largest industry proliferating the lowest paying jobs, but with less than 0.001% of those workers being unionized, you have a situation where you've got this immense workforce, 10 million workers with absolutely nowhere to go, and with such low wages and facing such difficult working conditions, everything from wage theft to pretty severe discrimination on the basis of race and gender to sexual harassment. I mean, all kinds of issues these workers are facing on the job, with really no voice or power. Naturally, when we started the organization, we were pretty much overwhelmed with cries for help from these workers. Yeah. And so we had to grow really rapidly to respond to that demand. And so in the last decade, we now have about 10,000 restaurant worker members in about 30 cities, actually. We've got staff in about 10, but workers have formed their own volunteer committees in another 20 cities or so. And so we're in about 30 cities. And we're also working not only with workers, but also with employers, good employers that are trying to do the right thing, provide good wages and good working conditions. We've partnered with about 100 employers around the country, and now even consumers.
It's so impressive. It's just it's remarkable. And didn't you say in the wonderful speech that I heard you give, which was electrifying, the room was on its feet when you finished? No, you were something else. This was at the Ms. Foundation Awards. Didn't you say that the poorest of the poor, the worst off of restaurant workers, are 70% female or something close to that?
That's right. So the reason that the restaurant industry is the largest and fastest growing and one of the most profitable industries that still pays its workers as little as it does is that there is this incredible trade association, very powerful, in fact, the 10th most powerful lobbying group in Congress, called the National Restaurant Association. We call it the other NRA. And back in 1996, under the leadership of a man named Herman Cain, who your listeners may remember well, tried to run for president on the Republican ticket. Herman Cain, actually, as the head of the NRA, the other NRA, struck a deal with Congress saying that they wouldn't oppose a modest increase to the regular minimum wage as long as the minimum wage for tipped workers stayed frozen forever. Now, tipped workers are servers, runners, bussers, and as you said, they are 70% female. These are women who work graveyard shifts at the IHOP and the Applebee's and the Olive Garden. They have 3 times the poverty rate of the rest of the U.S. workforce and use food stamps at double the rate of the rest of the U.S. workforce, which means that the women who put food on our tables can't afford to eat themselves. And these are often women with children. It's a really difficult situation, and it's being perpetrated by the very folks that are announcing, just announced $69 billion, record high profits, really turning hand over fist in monies because people are continuing to eat out, even in one of the worst recessions that we've experienced over the last couple of years. People have continued to eat out. The industry's continued to grow, and yet the workers' wages have stagnated at $2.13 an hour for the last 22 years.
My God, it is. And it's not even on people's radar very much. I mean, that's why it's wonderful that the group exists. It's So, first of all, before I forget, what is the website of the group if people want to find out more?
www.rocunited.org is the name of our organization. But in order to you can all sign a petition to let Congress know that enough is enough, because actually there is a bill that we've helped to create that's moving through Congress that would raise the wage of these millions of women across the country, millions of restaurant workers. It's called the Fair Minimum Wage Act. Okay. And there's a website we've created for consumers called thewelcometable.net.
Thewelcometable.net. Okay. And the bill is, what is the name of the bill again?
It's called the Fair Minimum Wage Act of 2013. And it was introduced by Senator Harkin in the Senate and George Miller in the House.
Okay.
And it would raise the minimum wage for these millions of women for tipped workers to 70% of the regular. It would triple their wages, and it would mean millions of these women being able to come out of poverty. And so you can go onto that website, you can sign a petition, you can also read more in the book that I've written called Behind the Kitchen Door that's available on that website. And you can see these beautiful film portraits of some of these women that Danny Glover's film company, Literature Films, has created based on the workers profiled in the book.
We have only about a minute or so left, but can you take a minute and tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to this? Because you're young
Sure.
and beautiful and fiery and fantastic.
Thank you. Well, my parents were immigrants from India, and I grew up in this country. I felt very strongly watching my parents struggle that I wanted to change the conditions of especially low-wage immigrant workers and low-wage workers in general in this country, especially women, as a woman. And so, I went to law school, went to graduate school, was working with low-wage workers, and 9/11 happened and changed my life. But the one thing I want to say is that I, too, for all those years of even working with low-wage workers, I ate out so often. I ate out 3 times a day sometimes as a New Yorker. I never thought about the people touching my food. And the thing that people should know is if my dining experience can be so changed by knowing these people's stories and knowing that there's something that I can do about it, I ask, too, that everybody out there who eats out so regularly, that we all contribute to changing the situation. First, by signing these petitions, letting Congress know enough is enough. Second, by speaking up every time we eat out and letting managers and owners know that as much as we care about local and organic and vegetarian, we care about how the women who are serving us are treated as well.
Those are wonderful guidelines. You became a hell of an organizer. A really good organizer.
Thank you.
Is rock, in a sense, the beginnings of the formation of a union? Do we hope for that?
No, I think, we are definitely part of a new labor movement, that's for sure, of especially of women and women of color leading a different kind of labor movement where voices of women really are at the forefront, where voices of immigrants really are at the forefront. I think it's a new and exciting part of the labor movement that's growing. We don't want to be a union. We're not a union. I think we're a different formation, but definitely and squarely, in solidarity with everybody else in the labor movement.
It reminds me of the early days of the farm workers, except with feminist consciousness. It's all the best of the farm workers, but modern, contemporary, and with young women like you at its leadership. It can't fail. Thank you so much. Thank you, Saru, for being Saru, and for Rock. And everybody who hears this, and certainly me, will always relate from here on in very differently to whenever and wherever we eat out. Thanks again for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. And we have to pause here for a short break. I'm Robin Morgan, and this is Women's Media Center Live. Our next guest manages to be funny about roller derbies, pregnancy, and lots in between. So don't go away. After Hurricane Sandy, parts of the East Coast have returned to normal, but others won't see normal again for quite some time. One group getting volunteers and aid supplies to those who need it is called Occupy Sandy. Made up of a coalition of Occupy Wall Street activists, community organizers, and technologists, Occupy Sandy is using social media and other software tools to identify and quickly respond to urgent needs among the hardest hit communities. You can help. To donate or to volunteer, visit occupysandy.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And we're back with a woman who has been a Derby doll skater, a comic, a blogger, a book author, and through it all, Pamela Ribon. Welcome, Pamela, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you.
Well, it's good to have you here. You are one very funny writer. And by that, I don't mean funny odd. I mean funny haha.
I'm used to hearing both. It's okay.
Your blog, Pamie.com, it's P as in Peter, AMIE.com, is wise and smart, and also at times absolutely hilarious. The ones that I remember in particular are the one on women's work in Hollywood and the cuteness of the script girl and all of that. And there were a number that you wrote on being pregnant and on the unsolicited advice that people seem to feel they can give you at the drop of a condom. It is amazing, and it brought back when I would waddle down the street following myself in the 9th month, and everybody would give me advice. Did I ask? No.
No. I had a stranger in an elevator touch me touch my stomach as the doors closed, and a stranger male, asked, "What are we having?"
What are we having?
Yes.
God. I was already a feminist activist when I was pregnant, and I did a couple of television shows to promote some upcoming demonstration, and I was, very serious about it. And it was Griffin, Merv Griffin, who said, "So I see," and I was talking about the first major anti-rape demonstration of the women's movement, and all he wanted to talk about was, "So I see we have a bun in the oven."
Oh my goodness.
And I said something like, "If you mean, am I pregnant? Yes, I'm pregnant. Now, can we get back to the demonstration?" "No, let's talk about the bun in the oven." And I finally got very cranky and said something about, "I am not pregnant with pastry. I am pregnant." Anyway, back to you. You also wrote a terrific book, which managed to become, hallelujah, an Oprah choice for her book club, about your roller derby days. Roller derby can save your life. Tell our listeners something about your roller derby days.
Well, it started. I started with roller derby like I think anybody does. I went to see Sex and the City, the movie. And my girlfriend at the time sat down, of course she's still my friend, but she became my derby wife. But no, I'm getting ahead of myself. But she sat down next to me and she was like, "I'm so sore. I started training with the derby dolls yesterday." And I said, "You can do that?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "I'm coming with you. I want to do that too." She said, "I feel like you're serious about this." I'm serious. And then I did it. I had watched roller derby when I was a kid, which is a different version. That's a very fake, stylized, kind of like pro wrestling version. And what is played now is a full contact sport with rules and lots of rules. But I just showed up, and I kind of snuck in because they didn't realize I hadn't signed any forms.
No.
Checked that I had the required 3 insurances, which I do. It's okay. But I didn't leave, and I just kept skating.
And how long were you a derby doll?
3 years. I was injured in the middle of that, but I count it all. I count 3 years. But you get all kinds of injuries. So sometimes it's not a question of will you get hurt; it's how and when. But so I eventually tore a ligament in my knee, so that had me out for a few months. But once that was healed, I went back. I basically stopped once I got very busy, and it requires a tremendous amount of time, of your free time.
I see.
For free, because you actually, you pay dues to skate. You do not make any money.
Yeah. You have another book another bun in the oven, but this time another book. You have another book.
They do take about the same amount of time to make, and you are proud of them, and you want people to look at them. They're very similar.
They are. And then they go off and have a life of their own, and you realize that they're like a grown child going off and making friends that you know nothing of.
Oh, that's very sweet. That's true. I had not thought about that, but yeah, it does happen.
Tell about the more recent book.
You Take It From Here came out last year. It's kind of a beaches and steel magnolias in terms, or at least in terms of theme. Two lifelong best friends who live in the South, and one is diagnosed with terminal cancer and has informed the other that she's going to be taking over her life. And she wants her to finish raising her daughter and marry her husband, but it'll be a secret pact that they're doing.
Oh, my God. Wow.
They're going to trick them into folding her friend in as the second version of her. It's kind of about what we do for our friends and how sometimes we let one of our friends be the bossiest in our lives.
Yep. It sounds also like a ready-made movie. Has anybody picked up an option or bought a right?
No, we're not yet. We have tried. There's been some interest, but it is not. I don't know. Cancer comedies are a little difficult.
I would think that it became a little less verboten because of the series that was on. What was it? Showtime.
The Big C.
The Big C, right. So a lot of things that just were unmentionable before, in no small part because of the women's movement and because of women deciding, hello, I'm mentioning this. A lot of things have become suddenly mentionable, if not mainstream. And there's another one being written as well.
Yes, I am at work on a comedic memoir that will come out at the top of next year about my teen years. I was quite prolific then too, and I kept a lot of letters and stories that I wrote to boys that I would give them, and I would save myself a copy. And it's clear that I do not know what boys want. From pretty early on, when I forced a boy that I liked to watch broadcast news, because I thought then he would understand that I'm Albert Brooks and he is my Holly Hunter.
Absolutely.
So we were 12.
Oh, what a great 12-year-old kid you were. Have you ever done stand-up?
Yes. Well, I tend to do more one-person shows or monologues.
Mm-hmm.
I find the pressure of stand-up. I don't know how anybody can like me in 6 minutes. I need a good half hour.
Yes, but you do realize that you're saying no. I can't do the short thing. That's too easy. I have to do the really long thing. That other people would consider much harder.
Right. And it's just because I don't know how to edit. If I could maybe get it down to something shorter.
I sympathize. When somebody says a piece needs to be 800 words, I think, I can't clear my throat in 800 words. That's my lead,
I'm just warming up.
That's right. You got it. Well, all right. Say again the names of the recent book that since roller derby can save your life.
Going in Circles is the name of that book. Roller Derby Can Save Your Life is the name of the essay that I wrote for Oprah.com.
Okay.
That is about divorce and roller derby. But the book is called Going in Circles. Last year's book was called You Take It From Here. And the new book is called Notes to Boys and Other Things I Shouldn't Share in Public. And I don't have a release date yet. But it's
will you come back in the spring when it comes out and we'll talk more about it?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you.
That sounds terrific. Thanks.
Thanks. To hear some of my awkward erotica.
Oh, I'd love your awkward erotica. I love even the linkage of those two words. What, in one sense, what erotica is not awkward? So it's just yours is honest, awkward erotica. That's quite a tongue twister. It's hard to say. Anyway, thank you for being witty and funny and smart, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Congress. We're back to a plague on both their houses, and we have one from each house this week. Representative Vern Buchanan, he's a Republican from Florida, did one of those amazing about faces that just take your breath away. On June 3rd, his name appeared on the list of co-sponsors for House Resolution 43, which is a bill to remove the deadline for ratification of the, wait for it, Equal Rights Amendment. Remember that? It's coming back. We don't give up. To many of us, this move of his signaled that there was some bipartisan support for the bill, which I might add was the case for decades. Not in this Republican Party, but for years it was. But on June 6th, he withdrew his name from the list, and when women, including the National Women's Political Caucus, contacted his office to have an explanation of this, his aides claimed that he had been signed on as a mistake, as passive construction. Mistakes were made. But no, they didn't want more information on the ERA because nothing would persuade him, certainly not facts. So now he would win my Wrong-Headed Man of the Week award were it not for serious contention by Senator Carl Levin, the chair of the Armed Services Committee and a member of his own party. He took on a member of his own party, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat of New York. And he has announced he's going to remove her measure, aimed at curbing sexual assault in the military, and he's going to cut it from a defense spending bill. Her measure would have given military prosecutors, rather than commanders, the power to decide which sexual assault crimes to try, with the goal of increasing the number of people who report the crimes without fear of being retaliated against. So Levin is replacing her measure, which, by the way, has 27 co-sponsors, including 4 Republicans, with one that instead requires a senior military officer to review decisions by commanders who decline to prosecute sexual assault cases. In other words, it keeps prosecution of sexual assault within the chain of command, which is what the military wants and what we do not want. Barbara Boxer, in a Take No Prisoners statement, she's a Democrat of California, as I'm sure you know, said they basically embrace the status quo. It's outrageous. By the way, she's a co-sponsor of the Gillibrand bill. It is outrageous, and more, it is surreal. A plague, as I say, on both their houses. It's break time, and this is Women's Media Center Live, and to date, I remain Robin Morgan. Of course, you never know what I might be tomorrow. Coming up is the Pulitzer Prize-winning former columnist Ellen Goodman. Now retired, she's focusing on something entirely new, which you will not want to miss.
When it comes to talk radio, men still do most of the talking. It doesn't get too much better if you look at television, newspapers, film, video games, social media, literature, sports, and corporate or technology leadership. The Women's Media Center's Status of Women in the U.S. Media 2013 report details the persistent gender disparity in a range of media institutions that rank among the greatest influencers in American society. To read the full report, go to womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome back. Ellen Goodman was one of the first women to write for the op-ed pages and became the most widely syndicated progressive columnist in the United States. She's also authored 7 books, she's won a Pulitzer Prize, and now she's an activist on perhaps the most controversial subject of all, how we treat our own deaths. It's fascinating, and, surprise, it's empowering. Welcome, Ellen, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful to our mutual friend, the author Suzanne Braun-Levine, because she then told me about your new project, and I'm so glad you're doing the show. Now, in what Suzanne has called in her book Second Adulthood, you have a whole new project, and I think it's absolutely super.
That's right. I think I've gone from covering social change to trying to make social change.
Well,
and in this case, it's probably the largest social change. It's the next social change for our generation in many ways.
Absolutely. It's called the Conversation Project, and although we'll give the website a number of other times, let me do it right now. It's just theconversationproject.org. And Ellen is the co-founder and co-director. Tell about the Conversation Project.
Well, the Conversation Project is a public engagement campaign to have people's wishes for end-of-life care expressed and respected. We're based on the notion that we know how few people die in the way that they would choose, and how many of their survivors are left bereft and uncertain about whether they have done the right thing. And we believe that the way to change this so that people have more humane deaths but also die in the way they would choose is to have a conversation about it early at the kitchen table and not in the ICU.
Yeah. This is especially important to women, I think, for two reasons, at least two reasons. One, women tend to outlive men, so they're left with the difficult decisions. But also, some time ago, I read a study. You may know more about it than I do, and I've been trying to relocate it and haven't found it, but that routinely, women's wishes for end-of-life care, do not resuscitate, for example, are routinely ignored or overruled by family who don't want to lose the family glue, which is the mother and center of the family, whereas men's wishes are routinely followed. And I remember reading this because my teeth began to grind, and I thought, my God, even in death, even in death, there's sexism.
I haven't seen that, although I can imagine that we respect men's desires to be, quote, independent. Well, we think that women's desires should be those of the family rather than their own.
Precisely.
But I think, in fact, that both men and women, if they have these conversations with the people they love, then those people will honor their wishes. One of the tragedies that we often see is families arguing about what mom really wanted or what dad really wanted and having very different views. And whereas if you have that conversation, you'll not only be able to die in the way that you would choose, but you'll be able to be sure that your family doesn't end up depressed, uncertain, guilty about what they have done, and also in a contentious state.
Yes, exactly.
But I think it's also particularly important to women because, let's be real, women are the caregivers in our society.
Yep.
They're the healthcare decision makers for their family. And also at this moment in the longevity revolution, everybody keeps talking about 60 being the new 50, but we don't talk about 60 being the new caregiver for the 87-year-old. And that is just where it is at, so that this generation of baby boomer women are caring for their elders as well as thinking about their own mortality. And so it's a real sweet spot. I also think it's a sweet spot, this age group. I mean, I think it's a sweet spot because we're the generation that changed the way birth happened in America. And so we know about social change, and we have one more social change in us, and if we do, it's the one universal experience.
That's right.
Everybody will die, and if we change the way everybody gives birth, or we make progress, I should say, then we can change the way people die.
And it's just huge because it touches on religion, tradition, terror of change, all sorts of things. But it's a means, I think, of healthy control, not like control freak, but who wouldn't want to have a good death, to control the way that one leaves the world, to control the way that one leaves beloved people. And it's very empowering, your website. One wouldn't think that going to a source to discuss, oh my God, the unmentionable. In American society, we don't discuss sex, except we have it everywhere. We don't discuss death. We don't discuss illness. We don't discuss aging. So one goes to a website all about death. Oh my God. And it's a incredibly user-friendly, empowering website.
I think it's very warm, too, because the reality is that we have a conversation starter kit, which really has been incredibly successful. 40% of the people who come to our website download the starter kit, which is unheard of,
I was just going to mention the starter kit. Tell what's in the starter kit. It's great.
The starter kit really helps you start. I mean, a lot of people think that, oh, God, if I have to have this conversation, I'm going to be talking about medical stuff that I know nothing about, or I'm going to have to be talking in the abstract because who knows what kind of decisions will face us. And what we say is if you start these conversations early and you talk to people about what matters to them, not what's the matter with them, and you talk about values, not, if my left elbow and my right eyebrow are gone, pull the plug, but you talk about, okay, do you want to make these decisions? Or do you trust your doctor, B, your family? We ask you what matters to you in terms of do you want to continue living no matter what, or is quality of life more important than quantity of life? We ask all kinds of simple questions and ask you to fill in the blank of things like what matters to me at the end of life is. And some of the answers to that have been what matters to me at the end of life is that I recognize my children, and some of them have been what matters to me at the end of life is that I can still eat chocolate ice cream and watch football. So there's a whole range.
Sure.
And the truth is that we know from studies that you're no more likely to really know the wishes of your loved one than a stranger.
Wow.
And that's why we have to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
We think we know, but we don't.
Yeah. I have to tell you also, I came away feeling unusually proud of myself. I mean, I came away from your website because I carry a universal donor card. I have an advance directive. My son has a power of attorney. I have, an advanced medical directive, and I have a DNR, do not resuscitate form. I'm about as equipped with as I can be. So then, can
I ask you the next question?
Yes, ma'am.
It's nice to have all those documents, but have you had the conversation?
Oh,
you can have all of those documents, and if you haven't had the conversation with the person you want to be your decision maker and with others, those documents can be totally overridden.
I have had the conversation even before I knew it was called The Conversation. And in fact, I probably have made myself obnoxious with friends and colleagues having the conversation, urging them to do the same thing. So I feel personally just very grateful and validated by the website and the campaign.
Well, that's wonderful.
Talk again. Give again the website, please.
It's theconversationproject.org. That's theconversationproject.org. I think one of the other wonderful parts of this is that we believe that social change comes from telling and sharing stories. And this is certainly something I learned from the women's movement, that prior to the women's movement, everybody had a story, but they were sort of kept under wraps, and we all felt that we were the only one. And it was only when those stories were shared and expressed that change happened.
You're right.
And there's a real parallel now to this end-of-life movement. Because, again, everybody has a story. Most people feel alone when they're going through the trauma of making decisions for someone that they love. And then when you talk to them afterwards, and as a journalist, I would say it's been an incredible experience. All I have to do is mention the subject, mention what we're doing at the Conversation Project, and outpours a story. The story.
People come uncorked. Yeah. We've only got about half a minute left, but I'm going to ask one quickie Ellen Goodman question. We miss you and the column. Do you miss the column?
Well, I think it's really better to be missed than to have someone say, "Are you still writing? Is she still writing that?" I think we all have a second act and maybe a third and a fourth and a fifth, but it's good to be doing something different for a while.
And it's a wonderful different that you're doing. It's really great. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much.
And it's time for one more break. Yes, I'm Robin Morgan, all right, and you are listening to Women's Media Center Live, where, in just a moment, we'll address the question raised by all the surveillance and snooping going on. Privacy versus security. What's more important to you? Stick around.
Want to stay informed when there are changes to Social Security? Subscribe to receive automatic email updates on popular Social Security web pages with the click of a button. Just visit www.socialsecurity.gov/GOV delivery. More than 1 million people already receive updates to the pages they're most interested in. You can too. Look for the red envelope followed by a link that says Get Email Updates. To learn more, visit www.socialsecurity.gov/GOV delivery. Social Security delivers.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And we're back again. If, like me, you are finding yourself ambivalent, surprisingly so, about security measures that once you would have denounced in a heartbeat, you'll be especially interested in this next conversation. Jessica Neuwirth, a graduate of Harvard Law, founded Equality Now in 1992, and as its president built that NGO until today. It is arguably the foremost international women's rights organization in the world. She has also served as director of the New York office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She's worked with the UN International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, and recently she founded a new NGO, Donor Direct Action, about which she talked on a previous visit to this program. Welcome, Jessica, to Women's Media Center Live. Welcome back to Women's Media Center Live.
Hi, Robin. It's great to be back.
So today, I want to pick your brain for a conversation. We don't have to come up with a solution because I don't know that we can, but at least to ask some interesting questions about this whole spying, privacy, assembling of data by the government situation. I have found, to my surprise, that I'm more ambivalent about this than I would have expected. I mean, normally I have thought that all my juices would start to flow and say, this is all totally wrong, you can't do this, this is an infringement of civil liberties and privacy and so forth. But I also don't want to be blown to bits, and I have the feeling that if I'm ambivalent and looking for a nuanced way out, I can't be the only one. So you are a lawyer and a person whose life has been spent working for human rights, civil liberties, and other good things. What does this mean? And is ambivalence a slippery slope to becoming a conservative? God help me.
Well, those are hard questions. I mean, I think I definitely don't have any answers, but I'm happy to share some thoughts about it. I personally feel like you do. I'm not that clear. I think for sure I would have been outraged 15 or 20 years ago by all of this, and now I'm just kind of somewhat concerned. And I think, in a way, we're always on a slippery slope. You know, I think everything is a kind of balancing act when it comes to competing rights. And here, what we have is our concern for liberty and privacy versus our need for security and our fear of terrorism. And I think 9/11 just shifted the balance for lots of people. And the question is how much and where does the line move? But I think the line definitely moved. And in general, we're all, and certainly I'm probably willing to sacrifice a little more privacy for a little more security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am too. But you said an interesting thing to me the other day when we were talking about this, which I hadn't thought. You said it's when you position it as a as contesting rights, that made me feel a little bit better, because you said security is a right too, and I suddenly thought about Roosevelt's, FDR's, the 4 freedoms, and one of them was the freedom from fear. But I hadn't thought of security that way, and I think most Americans, up until 9/11, lived in this sort of golden privileged haze, where the rest of the world experienced terror in one form or another every day, whether it's of poverty or of violence or of war. So the question is then, when you're actually feeling the pinch of reality, do you lose your ideals?
Well, I think they're all ideals. I think, as you said, these 4 principles, which came up through Roosevelt, I think were imported by Eleanor Roosevelt as the chair of the drafting committee for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Mm-hmm. And so the preamble of that document, which is our cornerstone of the human rights movement, has all of those rights: freedom from fear and want, and then right to life and liberty. And I think the freedom from fear is what's now, we have more fear. Yeah. And then a lower expectation of privacy. I think the way in which global communications have evolved has just inherently kind of reduced our expectation of privacy. I'm concerned about that in general, not just with respect to the government. And it does trouble me often to think about how much information is out there that could easily be accessed by all kinds of people, and I don't know who and why and what they could do with it. So those are ongoing questions, and international law and law generally has yet to catch up with a lot of that. So hackers often are leading the way here, which is not too comforting. But I think security is an interesting part of international law, because it hasn't been, as you said, kind of our cornerstone. On the other hand, when you look at the history of the women's movement, I mean, security has been, for us, an effort to expand. And we've been fighting for a long time to expand our common understanding of that notion, so that we all agree that security includes security for citizens, not only from the state, but from other private actors, like men who rape and commit domestic violence with impunity. And in places like the Congo, you have collective security needs from rebels who are raping and plundering the local population. And in human rights terms, this is a violation of security, and it's the government who's responsible to protect you from that type of violation. And more recently, I should say, the UN and the international community have this new doctrine, responsibility to protect, which was used to justify the intervention in Libya, and which I think is an effort to expand some sense of responsibility to protect people from violence and, by extension, terrorism.
Those are all reach right into my brain and my heart, and I'm totally behind them. Where I get muddled is, well, for example, in New York State now, I think the court ruled, is it a New York State thing only, or is it national? The DNA test, as well as the fingerprint test for a suspect. And I had a strange reaction to that. I thought, I don't mind fingerprints, but is that because I've grown up with them? But forcibly taking a DNA test swab from a suspect somehow doesn't go down the same way. Is a different level invasion of privacy. What do you think of that?
I mean, I think it's somewhat, to be honest, I think it's somewhat psychological. It's slightly more invasive to have a DNA test, but in a lot of ways, it's really not that different in my mind from a fingerprint. Yeah. And what's good about DNA and fingerprinting is that they can establish with some certainty certain kinds of leads and investigative successes. But I mean, one trouble I have with all this current debate is they keep saying, well, we've prevented terrorist attacks. We can't talk about it, but we have actually prevented certain plots from moving forward. And then you just feel like, well, if you don't have the information, how do you know that we couldn't have prevented it some other way? There's a principle in law that I think is like you're trying to use the most tailored means when you're going to invade someone's privacy, and this is the value of a search warrant. The question will be, how invasive do you have to be? Do we need to take en masse everybody's phone records from all time for us to do that? Or could we narrow it down and we would have got the same result in all of these secret examples that we don't know about? We just don't know.
Right. Well, they're claiming that the reason for all of this collection, which they will not use, which sounds a little bit specious to me, is they have redefined the word intercept, which as a word person really unsettles me, my blood. So intercept now means, in their new terminology, looking at and reading or listening to records that they already have in their possession, which is a little so that, in other words, if they collect all this data but don't use yours or mine, they haven't intercepted. But that seems awfully self-serving. I mean, previously they would have had to go to a FISA court, which laid down and was a doormat anyway for them. So it doesn't seem to make sense, the collection of such massive amounts of data.
I mean, I'm getting a little bit of conflicting sense of what's really happening, because it's just so much contradiction from what this young man has said. And then I saw a former director of national security on TV saying he's just flat out wrong. So it's not that clear to me what the actual facts are. And it's not impossible from what I've read. They may actually have a FISA warrant, but the problem is they've expanded the concept of a warrant, which used to be really for individual purposes. And now there's these block warrants and collective warrants that just allow you to take these things wholesale. And I think they have these new distinctions, like the one you described about intercept, so that if you have the data but you don't actually search it, then you haven't crossed that line. And I think, of course, you've crossed a line. I mean, it's certainly more intrusive to read the thing than to have the thing. But again, like watching this young man who was really just a private contractor for a few years, and to feel that he had so much access, even if he couldn't read the data, to even know, and he may have technically been able to read it even if he wasn't allowed to. You know, the potential for abuse is just mind-boggling. Yeah,
maybe you've put your finger on it. It's the intensifying potential for abuse. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, a minute or so left. Do you have any ideas as an attorney, as a lawyer, practicing lawyer, what people can do about this? Or you're also an activist.
I think, I mean, the one thing this is not, something I am working on full time in any way, but I do feel, listening to the debate, that one of the other key issues here is how much of a public debate we're allowed to have. And that's where I do feel very strongly that there's a bright line. I find it troubling that some people on the airwaves are suggesting that the kind of revelations that were made, are just not, suitable for public discussion. And I think there was a recent lawsuit where the Supreme Court threw out Amnesty International for lack of standing, because they couldn't prove that anyone in particular who was bringing the lawsuit had actually been searched. But how do we know if it's all secret? And I think that there's no reason in an abstract way that we can't discuss whether or not we want to have our metadata collected. Like, I think that's not in my sense, that's not a compromise of national security that I can't live with. I think if it's whose metadata or what time frame and what countries, that could be more sensitive and jeopardize investigation. But the idea that any discussion is somehow a danger to national security, and the way this man has been maligned, in my view, for bringing it out as if he's really promoting another terrorist attack will be all his fault. I think that's excessive, and we have to have a public debate. And it's a sad thing that this debate is being raised by a leak, that it wasn't just part of a normal course of events. Yes. We would have that debate, and we would all say, okay, we're willing to let you look at our metadata, and Congress approves that. And I just don't see why we have to have secrecy at that level of generality. And some people do feel that we really have that secrecy. So that'd be my sense, is from a democracy point of view, we should be urging public debate about these issues in general. But on the other hand, I did notice that the Washington Post apparently held back publication of some of what he released. And I found that extremely interesting, because it also shows that there's a public consciousness even in the media, of national security. And I think that we should be proud of that. Yes. That they want to provoke the debate. They don't want to take any extra risks. We should be feeling free to engage in public debate.
Well, this is a start, and I'm grateful to you for coming on the show and raising these issues and helping me with my muddled mind on them, which is a little less muddled now. Thanks a lot, Jess, for being on Women's Media Center Live again.
Thank you, Robin.
And now it's time for Fighting Words. In 1923, a man named Mustafa Kemal Ataturk founded contemporary modern Turkey as a secular, non-religious state, a republic. He was quite remarkable. He instituted full political rights for women, and in public he asked, and they did so, his wife and his daughters to remove their veils. They were glad to do so. Well, last week in more than 50 cities around Turkey, women in the hundreds of thousands joined what is a grassroots protest against the current Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and his violent directed police response to peaceful protests in Taksim Square in Istanbul. He wanted to remove the park, as you may know, at the center, the one little space of green available. Women have specially good reason to stand against him. He came to power on an Islamist platform, although he claimed repeatedly that he was a moderate Islamist. I'm not completely sure what that is. A moderate Islamist is about as much a contradiction as, well, you get the point. Anyway, among the things that he and those surrounding him and his government have done is to actively allow violence against women to persist in homes and in public. They introduced an, quote, unjust provocation, close quote, law that offers institutional protection to men who perpetrate this violence. Women asked for it, in other words. For the women who have suffered such violence, they have refused to open shelters. They have called women who complained, made formal complaints, very few of them, but the ones who do, of being raped or harassed, they blamed them and called them immoral. Reproductive rights have been systematically attacked by Erdogan. He has given many speeches saying that every woman has a duty to give birth to a minimum of 3 children. He has opposed cesarean sections. Go figure, I don't know why that one. He has branded abortions murder, and only last year he floated a bill in legislation that would ban abortions altogether. So far it hasn't passed. He has made changes to education policy that make it legal for families to discontinue their children's school-based education after only 4 years. It's a policy that has special impact primarily on girls. He uses class as his refuge. He has polarized Turkey even more than it was. That is, into 2 camps, one being his base, his political base, religious, traditional, conservative, rural people, versus the educated, urban, quote, elites, some of whom I'm sure have been corrupt and deserve it. But the interesting thing here is that rural women have joined some of these protests. So where it comes to women, maybe the barriers are coming down and his base might be eroding. I'm hopelessly an optimist. In any event, there's a petition of solidarity with the women of Turkey on change.org if you feel like tracking that one down. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS station 1580 AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMClive.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Director Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams Chancellor, Technical Director Michelle Kinsey Bruns, and our founding sponsor Regina Kulik Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. In the coming weeks, we plan a summer festival of guests. Carol Gilligan, Dee Dee Myers, Anita Hill, a senator or two maybe, Jane Fonda, and bloggers and web activists and comedians and lions and tigers and bears, oh my. So be sure and join us next week here on Women's Media Center Live.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.